I have a question I want to ask that we didn't get time for last night. Everybody's against taxes. Nobody's going to raise their taxes, which is also what Tim Davlin said. But, aside from that, CWLP in 2008, they came and they asked for a big water rate increase to do a bunch of projects, including a pump station. And that part, the pump station got passed. There's a bunch of other little things that they didn't get, like, for example, they needed a new tower out west because there's concerns about the pressure of water out west. Are you a definite no on raising water rates? And what if the engineers come to you and say, hey, look, we need this money to maintain water pressure, or we need the money for infrastructure? What are you going to tell them?
Well, I think my response to this question when you guys put it in the paper, so you were one of the original ones that we filled out questionnaires, is I said that I was not for new taxes, except for in an emergency.
Okay.
Now, if infrastructure, just regular infrastructure, is not an emergency, but I mean, if there's some sort of an emergency situation where the community has to, then I guess that's something we're going to have to look at as a community. But I've never really in my life come from this real, no tax, anti-tax stance. But I have more and more developed, at least began to appreciate that more, because I really do believe that people have had enough. And when you go door to door, it doesn't matter if I'm in some of the lowest income neighborhoods all the way up to the highest income neighborhoods. I'm hearing the same thing. So it's not, it's just not going to pass muster in this economic climate. And I think people, again, whether we think it's, the movement to downsize government and cut spending and all of that, has been pretty successful, and I think in some ways I really agree with that. In other ways, I'm concerned. I mean, I'm concerned about cutting, slashing programs and social services in which people rely on. I also hear that at the door. I hear that every day when I go. I hear people say, mostly they're talking about state programs, but they're saying, I'm taking care of an elderly or a disabled son who's 35, and we rely on these programs, and we've been on a waiting list for 100. There's 100 people on a waiting list, and we've been on a waiting list for 5 years. Now they're cutting these. I mean, these are programs people rely on, and the stuff that the city does are services that people rely on, and we have to. But there has to be a place where we come to some kind of balance, and I think right now in this economy, that it continues to, I guess, stagnate. It seems like every couple of days you hear indicators that things are getting better, and then, then the gas prices are bad, and then the food prices are going up, and then, so it just keeps. We're not out of this yet, and and the state problems are going to continue to trickle down to us until that gets stabilized. I don't know if this new tax increase is going to completely. I don't think it's going to completely stabilize state government. So, I just don't feel that we are in a position to get public support for raising taxes. We raised it how many times?
Yeah, but I'm talking about. There's like 5 or 6 different tax and
taxes.
But I mean, if the engineers come to you and say, we need this and this, you're gonna the next 4 years you're gonna say, well, you guys, you're gonna have to make do with what you have.
Well, I guess it depends on how serious that is. I mean, if it's affecting our water supply, or it's it's unsafe, or we have again, if it's some kind of an emergency situation, I think that's different. And I've said, even like with this railroad consolidation issue, there seems to be this great consensus that everybody wants this on 10th and that, but we're not having a discussion with the community about what this is going to cost and how are we going to come up with the money to do that. And I've been the only candidate to say that we have to have an honest discussion with the public. I mean, part of, I think, the difference between what I bring to this race is that I come from a perspective and an approach that is more of a bottom-up approach than a top-down approach. And not that you go to the public for every little decision, and I'm not saying that. And of course, there are times when you have to be quite decisive, but but for some of these kinds of we have to have conversations. We have to educate the public about what's going on. We have to create awareness out in the public, and we have to listen to the public and find out what they want. I mean, what does the community want? I've been out there for 4 months hearing about everybody, not wanting their taxes raised, wanting to cut government, and every single person wants something from government. Every single person I talk to. But don't take the libraries away, or don't do this, or don't, mess with that, or don't mess with this. So, this has to be a broader conversation. What is it that we really want government to do? What is it that we think city government really should be providing and that people pay for? And then the broader priorities, all the other stuff that we all want in our community, we're going to have to figure out how strategies to get that. And that's where you partner, and you partner with other groups, you bring in private investment, you look toward state and federal. I mean, I'll just say, the one thing, I've been involved in this work a long time. There is no dearth of programs out there. There are many, many programs at the federal level, at the state level. Part of it is getting us, building our capacity to be able to go out and get it and bring that money back into our community.
It has become the cliche of your campaign to onlookers when I want to bring people together and talk about it. You say you've been going door to door all this time. Blagojevich also said he was going to, make the budget public. Everybody would have hearings all over the state. That never happened. You've been going door to door. You know what people think. When you keep talking about bringing people together and having a community conversation, doesn't that say you've heard all this, but you haven't made a decision? You can't make a decision yet. And or how are you going to manifest that when you're in the? I mean, where will this community conversation take?
I've been involved in community engagement efforts for my whole career. And I think some of the community engagement that has been done in this community, beginning with RUDAT and with the railroad consolidation and with the medical district, is a model that, 5 years ago, we never did that kind of stuff. I mean, maybe it was done here or there. I mean, I know Karen and Sarah did the 2020 plan, and I wasn't part of that.
She also
so I don't,
had the circles talking about
the race circles, which I was part of those. But the 2020 plan, I'm not exactly sure what kind of a community engagement process it was. I was one of the ones who was actually the person, or with a couple of us with Springfield Parents for Public Schools, that got the whole idea of community engagement with the Voices Initiative at the school district started. And you can argue that they're successful to varying degrees. But I think the ones I mentioned in the city, I think have been good models. I think RUDAT's been a good model, Medical District was a good model, and I think the way they're doing the railroad consolidation, and even the Stanford Avenue, where they're bringing people in and putting the information out and getting people to come together and trying to create buy-in and ownership in this stuff. I think it has to happen. I can come in there and make top-down decisions. I mean, Mike Houston says he's going to come and manage government. He's going to manage all of government. Well, good luck with that. I mean, I think there's more to doing this than just sitting in your office, huddled over spreadsheets. It's about being out in the community and having a voice in the community and listening to the community and I'm not just talking about the Springfield community. I'm talking about the state, the feds, that getting out there, being making things happen. Part of what happens at the leadership level is not all the day-to-day management. I think that what the mayor's primary, the number one thing that perhaps I'd be judged on is who I put around me as managers.
So let us know.
But I don't know yet. I mean, you want me to make people up, Bernie? I mean, I don't know that yet. I really do not know that. I have been working every day to try to win this race. I'm not sitting back, measuring the curtains. I haven't been doing that. And so, and I'd be kind of stupid to do that. I think this is a very competitive race. So, I'm not taking anything for granted here. And I don't know who that's going to be. I really don't. I mean, I'm not hiding that.
Whoever wins this race is pretty much going to have to hit the ground running, regardless of their approach. You've talked a lot about wanting to have buy-in in the community, having a voice, all of which is very admirable and should be a part of this. But I think there's also this underlying concern of how long is this going to take, and how long, given any particular issue, are you going to have these, say, round tables with the community, or whichever approach you choose to use? How long is that gonna go on before a decision is made? Now, obviously, you're not gonna know some of this till you get in, but have you given thought to that?
You know, I am not talking about having community engagement efforts for every single thing that we do at city government. I mean, I worked there for 7 years. I think out of anybody, I can hit the ground running. I know all the department, you know, I know primary department heads now. I know that some of the people underneath them. I know the functions of the departments in general. You know, I know how it works in general. Again, I mean, not down to every specific, you know, down to the, you know, to the public works garage level. You know, I mean, I'll be honest, I don't know all that. I don't think any of us do. Maybe Frank Coons does, but you know, it's not about having a collaborative process for absolutely everything. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. You know, and when you do this kind of work for as long as I've done it, you know, there's a lot of that you initiate yourself. There's, you know, when I get in there, like I said, the first thing I'm going to do that is focus on is putting my team together and getting a really good team together that I trust, that I think are the right people, that have the ability to engage the public, that will be out of their offices, out in the community and trying to keep in touch, but are also good managers and who are able to inspire their employees and set goals and look at what we're doing and all of that stuff. I've talked about all of that. I mean, that's, you know, I mean, the decisions that come up, if you know, things that come up right away, obviously, you know, I'm not going to, you know, call a community meeting for it. You're going to pull together the people that you have and the experts that you have and pull the information together, and you're going to try to, you know, but I'm not going to make a decision without having some information in front of me. I mean, you have to pull the people together who are the people. And then I think, you know, without having a big collaborative community discussion about every issue, there are people in the community that I know that I can call on, people that are affected by these, you know, by the work of what we do, that I can call on and get their thoughts about. I mean, I think that's just part of what you do, I would hope, in leadership positions, that you just don't make your decisions in a complete vacuum. But at the same time, I mean, I hear what you're saying. You have to be able to make a decision. I mean, I understand that. But, you know, in a campaign, you know, I personally, I think a lot of, you know, the stuff that, you know, it's a lot of rhetoric. And you know, all the, you know, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to come in, and in 30 days I'm going to do this, and, you know, and I'm going to manage top down, and, you know, okay, that's a very different style. The private sector doesn't even go with that kind of management style anymore. It's more about teamwork. It's more about, you know, inspiring people and communicating with employees and getting, you know, and having a system that works, as opposed to just the guy who's on the top or woman who's on the top just dictating everything from the bottom. I just don't think it's the right approach.
We had on you know, this editorial board twice endorsed Tim Davlin. You know, I grew up 2 doors from him. I knew him, you know, just about my whole life, and liked him and everything. But almost from the start, we as a news organization had really serious problems with that administration in terms of openness, in terms of the mayor's accessibility, in terms of hiring, as Bernie documented quite often in his column, where people would pop up, lose some state job, pop up at CWLP, whatever. Can you contrast for us how, and you know, you were in the administration, so you probably saw more than we saw from the inside, but how would your administration differ and or be similar to the Davlin administration?
Well, you know, I don't see very many similarities that I would have to the Davlin administration. But let me just say, too, that this kind of, you know, somebody getting, you know, let go from the state and popping up, and, you know, it's been happening at the county. It's been happening I mean, it happens all over this community. It's been happening for a very long time. And I'm not defending what's happened here at the city, because I think the Davlin administration took it to new heights. But it's it's what I've been talking about in terms of what this community has been involved. We have a long history with this kind of stuff, and it just didn't start with the Davlin administration. I think personally, being on the inside, and what I thought the Davlin administration, I mean, some of their biggest mistakes were that he hired people in top positions that were his very best friends, and some of whom were family. And I didn't know Mayor Davlin. I didn't know him before I ran for school board. I didn't know him when he was talking about an education liaison. Frank Coons at one of these said that that position was created for me. It's totally false. And he's one of Davlin's best friends, and he should know better. I didn't even know Davlin then. That was not created for me. But I think by putting in people like that, what I saw, and one thing I did get to know of Mayor Davlin was that he was very, very, very loyal to family and friends. And by putting family and friends in your top management positions, there was just, I thought, even from the beginning when it happened, that there was just going to be a natural progression of problems that are going to happen at that. It all started out pretty well, and I'm not even saying that those people weren't qualified for those positions. But as it goes, and then problems start to occur, and you've got people who are your best friends and your family in those positions, it's very difficult to then hold them accountable, or for when problems come up, because the loyalties are just too mixed. And I'll say I thought that was a major problem, and I would say I think when I wasn't in right in the beginning of the administration, but I came in, I think, in November, so April, so 6 months or whatever, but there's a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of energy in the beginning of that administration. I felt very proud to be part of it. I thought the team was good, other than I thought it was concerning that he had all of his friends there. But, I didn't know if it was just sort of a natural thing that happens in administration. I mean, things started to change as it, went on. And one of the things that I saw, and I think is somewhat, again, I don't know if it's just Davlin or if it just sort of happens and that you have to be careful of, but the inner circle just got smaller and smaller and smaller. And it just became where, and the people who were even on the inner circle, and I would say even in the next ring, which maybe maybe you would put me if you were looking at the cabinet, it was very like-minded people. And there wasn't a lot of outside perspectives, looking for, it was sort of groupthink. And I felt that when I was there. And again, that's because you put in your family and friends, that you're going to have people that just sort of kind of think like you. But even if you have people that are kind of, you're going to have people that maybe, you do tend to put in people that you trust and that share your philosophies and, that kind of stuff. But I think we have to be very careful that you're not reaching out to different perspectives and making sure that you're bringing that in. And I didn't see that happening there. And I saw it get worse as the administration went on. And again, the circle got very, very small. And I wasn't part of it. I wasn't part of it from the beginning. I was never part of the inner circle there. I mean, if there's a lot of history to all that. I mean, I was an advisor on educational issues. I think Mayor Davlin trusted me for my expertise on education. He'd say often to me, I don't know anything about this stuff. You know this stuff. I mean, my job was to do with educational stuff and not make him look bad in the process.
Mm-hmm. Well, give me an example. I mean, because again, you've made the statement several times that you're very forceful about stating your opinion, going your own way, doing what you believe is right. So, as part of this administration for a number of years, talk to me about something where you openly really just sort of clashed with Davlin. I mean, you talked about the groupthink and how you kind of sort of resisted seeing that occur, but talk to me about how you sort of did resist that in your own way.
I mean, one of the things that I guess, I don't know if you'd say it was an aggressive thing, but it was something that I brought up time and time again. I brought it up to Jim Donnellan. I brought it up maybe to Davlin a couple of times to his face. I didn't have a lot of one-on-one with Tim Davlin. I mean, maybe that's the perception that.
Well, your office was just a few doors away.
Sure.
Wasn't it? Yeah.
And when I usually talked to him was when
In
he
the
was
elevator.
walking by and he was running to the elevator, and I would see him and I would run out and try to say, Mayor Delvin, I need you to say yes. I'm trying to do this press conference. Can we do it? He'd say yes. And, that was kind of how it worked. I mean, I wasn't, there were a lot of times that door was closed and there were people inside there and I wasn't in there. So, like every day. So, I wasn't part of that. And quite frankly, I didn't try to become part of that. That was never my motivation for being in city government. I did the kind of work that I thought was valuable, that was good for the city, and that I reached out to the community to try to get my work done. The one thing that I did numerous times talk to about was what I perceived was the lack of women and minorities on the boards and commissions. And every time they would announce, who got on the boards and commissions, I would say, you guys, are you just not noticing this? There's 12 guys and 1 woman, and is this like, are you telling me that we can't find, qualified women for these things? And I offered many times to put lists together of women that I knew or minorities that I knew. I have a very good connection in the minority community. And I said, and I would often say, look, I know people. There's good people out there. There's people that are not gonna, I guess they didn't want troublemakers or whatever. I'm not sure what it is. And I said, there's lots of people out there that are, good professional people that we can find that are diverse. And for whatever reason, it didn't happen. And after a while, I just kind of stopped saying it. I mean, I said it numerous times. And, at a certain point, I think I came to the conclusion that was not a priority for the administration.
Sheila, back to Matt's question. How will your administration specifically be with regards to accessibility, openness as far as government is concerned, and accessibility of your staff?
Well, again, I mean, I just think that you have to look at my record. I mean, as candidates, we're all going to say, oh, we're all going to be open, we're all going to be transparent. But, ever since I came to this town, I've been working on those issues with government. So I've been working on openness and responsiveness in government, through the League of Women Voters, through the Springfield Parents for Public Schools, through a number of organizations that I've been involved in. So my record, this is where I come from. I've been a community advocate. I've done it at the state level. I've done it, it's a different kind of person in city government. I'm not afraid of outside groups coming and pressuring and pushing, because that's where I've been. That's what I've done. That's where I come from. Now, clearly, when you're in, it's a little bit different. And I had that, I had that as education liaison too. You take on somewhat of a different role. But I never changed when I became education liaison. I never changed the kind of work that I did. I did the same kind of work. I mean, that education report that I did, the African American Student Achievement Report that I managed and, did a community group of 30 or 20, 30 people, whatever it was, for 3 years. And do you think that was a popular report? Oh my God. I mean, it wasn't popular in the African American community. It wasn't popular in the school district community. I can tell you Dr. Milton didn't like it. Diane Rutledge didn't like it. Nobody liked it. But the group that I was working with, and we worked very hard on that. Gary Plummer was part of that. There was a number of very, prominent people on that believed very strongly that was the right thing for us to do. And there was a number of minorities on that as well. So, I don't know. I think I don't understand, and didn't understand when I was there, why there was such resistance to conveying information.
You're going to have a spokesperson?
Yes.
You're going to have a deputy or
I don't think it's I
executive
won't call it a spokesperson. It's not called a spokesperson. It's called the Director of
Communications director.
Communications. And that's what it'll be called, and that's what that person will do. It's not a spokesperson. It's a communications director. And I think they're very important. And I would think that if anybody would want a communications director, it would be the media.
One of the
Well, let me just
Sure,
touch
sure.
back. I mean, I think there's no substitute for talking to the person who is actually making the decisions or setting the policy.
If I could add something to that,
Well, and I
too
don't,
often Ernie would be used as a shield.
as the soul, right. But I also
And
think,
as
you
a
know,
person who would claim not to know anything
Yeah.
about anything.
And Edwards actually picks up the phone when you call him.
I mean, it would be nice to get the mayor on the phone from time to time, is all we're saying.
oh, so it was the mayor, you wanted to talk directly to the mayor. I thought you were talking about more like with department heads and that
Well,
kind of stuff.
I will tell you,
But-
I mean, when we had, I'll give you an example. I mean, when we had the case with the people watching porn at CWLP, one
Mhm.
thing, although I still think we have the right to have the full list of names, I did appreciate the fact that, we made a call, we got a call back from the mayor, he arranged for the HR person to come over and walk through exactly what it was.
Mhm.
And that never happened during
See-
the experience I had with the Devlin administration. You've covered it longer than I have, and certainly you
No,
have,
Tim
but-
Tim closed up quickly.
No, and I wouldn't
But
know,
you know what?
know
I
that.
felt like
mean,
it actually gave a much better, deeper, well-rounded picture about what was going on.
Right.
But I guess that's the point I'm trying to make, and I think
Sure.
Aaron's point here is that there has not been that kind of transparency or willingness to engage. And it's not just about the media, really. It's more about
right.
people who
but,
have
but when I
questions.
talk about engaging the community in public policy, media plays an important role in that. I mean, I consider
Yeah.
you guys as part of that.
Mhm.
You know that. I had you speak to my class on that. I mean, there's a lot of actors in public policy, and media is one of them, and is a very important one of them. So I consider that to be part of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about engaging and having input and all of that stuff. I mean, I had no idea that Mayor Devlin wasn't answering the phone for you guys. I wouldn't know that.
No phone number available.
No, I wouldn't have ever known that. And it's the same kind of thing with and I've heard this, I mean, I'm hearing it now from you, but I've heard this from others. I've heard it from workers. I've heard it from unions. I've heard it from, that they too did not feel that they had access or that there was,
Well, he's in Ireland too much.
an open communication.
Joke.
I don't know. I mean, there was, but I will say too, there was a sense there, and I think it grew. And maybe it was just I became more aware of it as it went. That that there was more and more resistance building in the administration to outside groups, to
Questions.
to questions, to I hear all the time about resistance at legal. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know all the specifics of all those issues, but when you start to go out in the community and you hear the same complaints and concerns from neighborhood groups to business groups to developers to, and you start to hear it, pretty broadly, then you start to say, well, maybe something's wrong here, and again, I don't know the specific issues. I mean, some people on the other hand will argue that, legal departments doing their job if everybody doesn't like them. I've heard that as well. So, I guess it's hard to make a judgment about whether or not on a specific situation were they being resistant or were they, just following the law, that kind of thing. But I do think that there did develop, it seemed, almost this game between the media and the administration. And again, it's a totally different approach than, I'm not sure why that was the approach that they took. I don't know what they were trying, I don't know why. Again, I think, I come to this with the perspective and the, the principles of that we are spending other people's money. I come to that just from day one, that every day we're in there spending other people's money. And that means that those people have the right to know what's going on. Now, within the law, I think we have to follow the law, of course, but, other than that, I don't see any reason why we're not engaging the public more in what we do, and including the media.
Let me just ask one quick question. It sounds like you had some pretty fundamental differences with how the Devlin administration operated. Inclusiveness, which has certainly been a core part of your campaign, how people were dealt with. You were there as liaison for 5, 6 years?
7 years, almost 7, 6 and a
years,
half,
excuse
yeah.
me, okay. Did you ever think about leaving? Just because,
Mhm.
talk to me about that. Because it sounds like there's some things that really struck at what you're running on right now.
I actually submitted my resignation, I think, 4 times. 3 times were more symbolic, because every year, if you remember, I was brought out in front of city council and, pretty much told how worthless the position was and that it needed to be cut, and then he put it back in. So when those, early on, when that happened, I would, the next day, submit my resignation, because I thought that that's what you do. I didn't want to be, again, to not be a problem for the administration. I felt like if that was easier, if that let him off the hook, that he didn't have to, if it wasn't problematic for the administration, then I would submit my resignation, and he would always not accept it, and then we would move on. Okay, part of my frustration in that, as that process went on year after year, was I never felt like he would explain to the public why he was keeping the position. He just would keep the position. So, and that was that. That brings up. You asked me before what was something that I talked with him about. I would talk directly with him about that, and that was a frustration for me. And I'd say, look, you need, if you value the position, then you need to be articulating it out in the public and not just putting me back in just to put me back in, because then, the perception is that I'm just this political person. I don't know what the perception was, but I knew it wasn't good. Whether they thought, I don't know what people think or say. But it didn't, because he would never really defend it. He did it once. I think it was the second year. He tried to defend it at city council. He did an okay job. It wasn't, I didn't think he threw in all his chips, let's put it that way. But, so there were frustrations for that, but I loved the work I did at the city. And I thought I was doing good work.
What was the 4th time? I'm sorry. You mentioned the 3 times.
The 4th
budget
time,
process.
I really don't want to get into the specifics of, but let's just say it was during the layoffs, the big layoffs. And the environment at the city was just horrible. I don't know that I've ever been involved in that. I was earlier in my career once involved in where people were getting riffed, and I kind of remember that, but I was younger. Just the climate there was horrible, and it was everybody was sort of fighting for their own. And there was a lot of backbiting and my job's better than this person's job, and this person should go and I should stay. And just in terms of just people were very uncertain, very upset, very unclear. The unions were fighting. Everybody was very upset about, and I think based on the uncertainty of what was going to happen, and people were worried about their livelihoods, and everybody was sort of hunkering down. And I went to Mayor Davlin and I said, this time, because I was being, again, my position was being put out there, even though I made $15,000 a year on contract for full-time work. It didn't matter. I was the poster child for waste and abuse in government. And I went to him and told him that I had had enough, that I just didn't think that, I was being targeted, and I didn't, in a sense, people were, I just felt like, it was getting uncomfortable, and that my position, should probably go. And let me just say that Mayor Davlin is was a very convincing person in his own way, and he made it pretty clear to me that would not be a good decision for me to do.
So are there aldermen that opposed you being in that position?
Oh, yeah.
That you're going to be working with now?
I think, yeah, because, it changed, but I think the only alderman that ever supported my position was Gail Simpson. Sam Canman did once or twice. Sam Canman did, I think, pretty consistently, and then toward the end, he didn't. And Bruce Strom did early on. I actually worked with Bruce. Bruce was probably the only alderman that I remember that ever really called on me to work on issues of school. There were some school issues with Lindsay and the neighborhoods and that kind of thing, and Bruce and I worked on some of that together. And I believe that he may have voted for my position once or twice. Mahoney maybe did. No, I don't think Mahoney did. I think Lesko did too. Lesko voted I think, once to support it. Chris Tylen voted once to support it, but I think that was, I think that was some sort of a swap. So I was pretty surprised that when I left that, I said, why did Chris Tylen vote for that? And they said, there was some
A
other
stop sign,
issue.
probably.
Exactly. There was something else that I was being swapped for. So
Welcome to City Hall.